Welcome to part 2 of this module, Core Concepts of the Census Data API. Our goal for this part is for you all to be able to identify and understand the purpose of variables, functions, parameters, and predicates in your API query. And when we say API query or API call, we are just referring to your request to the API to get data returned to you. Almost every request you make is going to touch on each of these core components: variables, functions, parameters, and predicates. Let's talk a little bit more about each of those. Variables allow you to access the specific data you need, and you can include up to 50 variables in the same API call. As you can see from the examples in this table, some variable names are very intuitive. As an example, the variable births would provide you data for the number of births. The variable name would give you results for the geography name, such as Maryland. However, because there are so many variables in larger data sets such as the American Community Survey and Decennial Census, they used code-based naming conventions. As an example, B01 001_001E is a variable name that gives you data results for the total population. Later on in the course, Amanda will talk more about the meaning behind this code-based system. Not only will you include API variables in your requests, but there are many details about each variable that you will be able to explore in the API Discovery tool. Amanda will show you this later in the course. We've shown some key concepts in the screenshot in the upper right. As you can see, there are a few columns that will provide information for each of your variables. One piece of information is whether that variable is required or not required. Most variables will be optional for whether you choose to include it and ask for that specific piece of data. Occasionally, datasets do have required variables. The second detail is the attributes for your variable. Attributes are additional variables you can include in your API call that give more information for the primary variable. For instance, they may provide labels, annotations, notes, margins of error, statistical significance, or flags related to your primary variable. The last bit of information that you'll be able to see in the Discovery tool is the predicate type. There are a few main predicate types that we wanted to introduce you to: string, integer, and float. These predicate types tell you the specific output that your data can be in. So if you're working with a string variable, that tells you your output can be in the form of any combination of text, numbers, or special characters. For example, you could get output value that says retail trade, E1, $41,287, or 140. The second predicate type, integer, tells you that your output will be in the form of numbers with or without decimals. For example, you could get an output value of 140 or 49.2. Another predicate type, float, tells you that the output for your variable will give you data for numbers with decimals. As an example, 49.2. In order to request the data that you're interested in getting from the API, you'll need to include parameters and functions. You'll put the get parameter in nearly every query you're working with, and this will allow you to specify the list of variables you need. You can see an example API query on the right side, and where we've bolded the placement of $get equals before the list of variables. Amanda is going to walk through how to construct API calls in the next part of this module. We just wanted to point out here what this does for you, and that you'll need to include the get parameter in your API calls to use them. And then there is the group function. So with the get parameter, you can include up to 50 variable names separated by commas. With the group function, you'll specify in your API call group, and in parentheses, the table ID that you're interested in getting data for. This will give you results for an entire table. It pulls the data for all variables for that table in one easy command. You don't have to specify each individual variable that you're interested in, and even if the table has more than 50 variables, you will still get results for all variables for that table. We're going to work with both of these functions and parameters in this course. The last major component of an API query is a predicate, and they are parts of your query that begin with ampersand. A predicate is a formal way to say that you're including something in your API call that will filter or limit your results in some way. You can limit your results based on geography, time, or value of a particular variable. In this course, we're going to be working with limiting your results based on geography. The first predicate for geography is &4 equals. This predicate allows you to specify the geographic level that you're interested in, as well as the specific geographies you want data for. In the first example in the table, we can see the predicate provides data for all counties in the United States. As you're requesting the geographies you want and need, some cases will require you to further refine your request, including &in equals allows you to further limit your results for nested geographies. As an example, you can include the predicate in the second example to get data for all counties that are nested within the state of Maryland. A second way you can limit your results is based on time. In order to do this, you'll include ampersand, insert your time variable and put equals, then specify the value you want. As an example, ampersand time equals 2019. That would give you data for the year 2019. Please be aware that this particular way of limiting your results based on year are applicable for time series datasets only. In our API, time series datasets make up a small portion of the overall datasets that are available. In this course, our examples will come from the American Community Survey, which is not organized as a time series dataset in our API, so we will not be working with this predicate. And the last way you can limit your results is based on variable value. Similar to time, you'll include ampersand, insert your variable name, and put equals, then specify the value you want to filter by. As an example, including ampersand pop group equals 400 would restrict your results to data for the population group 400, which refers to the Hispanic or Latino population. That's just one example on how you can limit your results based on variable value, but there are a variety of variables in our API that have a specified number of categories that you can filter by. As you're looking in the Discovery tool, a good indication that the variable provides data for meaningful categories is when it says default displayed in the required column. When you see that, the output for these variables will be for categories expressed as some combination of letters and numbers. One example is the variable pop group from the American Community Survey, where you can see a range of values that refers to different population groups. Another example is the universe variable from the Population Estimates program, where a value of C provides data for the civilian population. Now that you have a basic understanding of the core concepts that will help you make your own API calls, we invite you to dig deeper by checking out the API user guide included in the link at the bottom of this screen. As you gain more experience working with the API, this is a great guide that provides more in-depth explanation and examples to explore these concepts in greater detail.